What's up, nerds? Today I'm gonna be making a tier list because that is a interesting and completely original idea to make a YouTube video about. This tier list is obviously gonna have a little Nerd Valley twist on it, as we're gonna be ranking the Fallout games. There's only 8 Fallout games, so there's only gonna be 5 tiers. These tiers are S, A, B, C, and F. There's some real range to the quality of this series. Starting from the start, of course, we've got Fallout 1. First game of the series, OG of Fallout. Respect has to be given where it's due. It established a lot of lore that's still prevalent within the series, and it laid a lot of the groundwork for the more general things like the Brotherhood of Steel and Super Mutants. It also had pretty fun gameplay for the time, but I think nowadays the whole 90s turn-based style just doesn't really hold up as well. I do love these games though, and I have a great time whenever I play them, but I'm just never gonna put the hours into them that I put into the modern games. It's the OG, everybody loves it, respect given where it's due, but they definitely get better. So I'm gonna put it in B. Alright, next game. Next up on the list is Fallout 2, which in terms of gameplay is almost identical to Fallout 1. That being said, it adds some pretty cool lore itself, being the first game to introduce the Enclave and the NCR. It also really more adds to the lore of the first game rather than just referencing it like the rest of the series does. Plus, I mean it has two of the most badass characters of all time taking the lead roles. Obviously, that being the Chosen One and Frank Horrigan. To this day, these guys are in competition to be the best protagonist and antagonist in the series, only really rivaled by that of Ulysses and the Courier. The game also has more and more fun references to real-world pop culture, which is super cool, but it is still the exact same gameplay. Plus, I haven't even mentioned the fact that it has probably the worst character slash piece of lore to exist ever. But just like Bethesda does, we're gonna ignore that and throw this little sucker into A tier, then move on. All right, Fallout Tactics. I'm gonna be real. I am not the biggest fan of this game. I feel like it's pretty similar to the first two in terms of gameplay, but with just a little bit of extra shit thrown on top. That being the added tactical element, which like I'm already not super into the turn-based 90s games. I really don't like the added tactical gameplay. I feel like the story was also pretty subpar at best, but like the lore is very fun, pretty strange compared to the lore we kind of get for everywhere else, but it it's enjoyable. Also possibly like not even canon, but parts of it might be. I don't know. But it is cool being the only real insight we have into the Midwest lore. Plus, R. Lee Emery voice acts in this. If you've seen Full Metal Jacket, you can appreciate that. But for me, being placed in Chicago is pretty much where all the interest lies. It's just not very fun in terms of the gameplay. So I'm just gonna put it in C tier. It isn't absolutely trash. F tier. That spot's kind of reserved. If you know, you know. Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, the shittiest game ever created if Atari hadn't existed. I feel bad for that. Atari's good. That joke's mostly about the ET game. They've got some shit. But yeah, this is the game I was talking about when I said that F is kind of reserved. I know you all thought it was going to be another one, but clearly you haven't played this steaming pile of in terms of Fallout, though, it's just not Fallout. It's a raunchy beat 'em up game with some Fallout lore and the dumbest angle of all time. I mean, seriously, if you're gonna keep anything from the turn-based era, you keep the top-down angle. And to make it worse, it isn't even really top down. It is like bird's eye. You're staring directly down at your character's head. It's also just vulgar for the sake of being vulgar most of the time. I mean, call me a liberal snowflake, but this game just goes over the top whenever it can. Every piece of dialogue feels like you're talking to a 10-year-old that just learned how to cuss, and every female looks like they haven't heard of any clothing but like the thinnest two pieces. The whole thing is just like akin to what the boys comics are to the comics industry. It is the boys of the Fallout series. So yeah, clearly an F, and we'll move on. Next up, we've got Fallout 3, and say what you will about Bethesda, but this is quite literally the game that breathed life back into the series. It was the game to bring that style of first-person gameplay Bethesda's known for to the Fallout series. Like Elder Scrolls, but with guns. It also gave us what are probably to this day still the most popular versions of the Brotherhood of Steel and the Enclave, as well as our most in depth look into life within a vault. And it not only has references to previous games, but also references future games with things like the Institute Railroad side quest in Rivet City. To be fair, it's personally my favorite Fallout. It was the first one I ever played, which might have a little bit to do with why I like it so much. Because with everything I've said about it, similar to kind of what I was saying with Fallout 1, I think compared to the games that would come later, it's hard for it to just not feel a little lackluster in some areas. Weapons are a big one, not just because later games like New Vegas and 4 have in-depth weapon modification systems, but even Fallout 2 had weapon upgrades. So to not see anything like this in Fallout 3, it kind of sucks. Plus, there also is just nowhere near as much weapon diversity in this game as there is in the entire rest of the series. I don't know so much about Fallout Brotherhood of Steel, but that game doesn't fucking matter. I'm conflicted about the armors though, because on one end, the normal armors are pretty bare bones and also don't have a whole lot of variation. But to counter that, the power armors are probably almost as diverse as they are in Fallout 4. Definitely way more than New Vegas. But like I said, similarly to the first one, because it's the first game with this style, I feel like it's obviously going to often feel pretty bland. I do love it. It's my personal favorite, and I love what it did for the series, but I have to admit that it's lacking too much of what the later games would bring to the table. And so for that, I'm going to put it in A. I feel like that's fair. All right, Fallout New Vegas, the obvious fan favorite. And let me get this out of the way first. I personally dislike the super hardcore New Vegas side of the Fallout fan base. I think they're extremely toxic. It's one thing to appreciate a game for being great. It is a completely other thing to use that game's quality as an excuse to put down other games and to put down people that enjoy playing those other games. That being said, let's talk about the game itself because it's fantastic. It is probably the most compelling story and lore in the entire series, without using the tried and true, let's be honest, crutches that are the Brotherhood and the Enclave. It also brings back the NCR, which is a somewhat small faction we'd only seen in Fallout 2. And it brings it back as a major player in the main story as well. It also has almost all of the coolest characters in the entire series. I mean, Benny, House, Caesar, Lanius, Joshua, Elijah, the entire think tank, and Ulysses. Not to mention a lot of the coolest companions, and plus even the courier himself is probably the sickest main character in all of Fallout. Up there in all of gaming as well, I want that to be said. It also introduced the first actual weapon modification system into the series, as well as way more variations to the base armor, and some other cool unique armors like the legendary Ranger's Duster. Lastly, to further explain how great this game is, its one downside is that it ends after the Battle of Hoover Dam. With all that said, I think it's clear that New Vegas is the S tier Fallout game, so we're going to drop that there. All right, up next, we've got Fallout 4, which is probably the most controversial game in the series. A lot of people that hate it, a lot of people that say they don't like it, but have more hours on it than any of the other games. There's people who do like it, but maybe not as much or only around as much as the others. And then the rare few who it's their favorite one. In my personal opinion, I think it's definitely up there as one of the most fun Fallout games with some major replayability. I also think its weapon and armor modification system is fantastic. Plus, it has the absolute best mechanics for power armor they've ever done. It literally feels like you're a walking tank. But I've done a video on why people hate Fallout 4, and I know that none of those things are really things people dislike or disagree with. Mostly it's things like the story, the dialogue, the settlement building, and the general tone switch from the rest of the series, which are all fair, agreeable points. I think it does stand above the rest in terms of mechanics and gameplay, honestly, but it is held back majorly basically by the writing. If those elements were changed to be more like the other games in the series, I think it could be perfect. I think it could be the best game they've made. But because these things are so big to what people love about Fallout, I think that sets it back enough that I have to put it in B. All right, last game. Fallout 76, let's ruffle the feathers because I'm going to be real. This game is not as bad as you all want to make it out to be. Story wise, I will say non existent because it's really not. There's some bullshit about reclaiming Appalachia and the Scorched and shit, and everything else with the seasonal updates are kind of just like strung together DLCs. But in my opinion, it is very fun. I would argue possibly even more fun than Fallout 4. I will admit, mainly just because it's online, so it's constantly being updated, but it also does add some cool shit. I really like the crafting. I think the plans are an awesome idea, and I love how much they've diversified the weapon perks. Shotgunner and rifleman being separate, gorilla and gunslinger being separate. I think it's cool. Plus, it's by far the most diverse with weapons and armor, and has some of the most unique items that have been in the game for a while, at least since New Vegas. So I guess since like one game. And being an online game, you can get cool skins for shit through like the seasonal tickets or the atomic shop. I know everyone hates the whole in-game store shit, but there's some cool shit in there. So off. They also just released that Ghoul update, which was awesome. Everyone should go check out my video on that. All in all, though, I think it's a very, very fun game. It doesn't really feel like Fallout. I agree with that. It doesn't have much of a story going on, but it is super fun. And so I'm not going to put it in F with POS. I mean BOS, but I'll put it in C along with Tactics. I think that's fair. Plus, it is kind of funny. I feel like I said the opposite about Tactics, where it's not at all fun but has enough, like a lot going on that's pretty cool. But yeah, that's my tier list for the Fallout games. I think it's a pretty good list that most fans would agree with. I actually almost feel like it's too agreeable, like I played it too safe. I should have thrown in maybe a little more personal opinions rather than general things, spice it up. But I think it's pretty solid. There might be some things people disagree with, but I don't know. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. All right, later, nerds.